Hey guys, and welcome to the Wednesday night Grumpy Sound Guy show. I want to thank everyone for hanging in there with me. Last week we were up to our eyeballs doing what we love to do. We had a 4-day festival in Inner Harbor, Baltimore, in the Fells Point district, and had an absolute ball down there. Had some challenges to overcome, and we overcame them, and were able to get a second crew over to Camden Yards for the Baltimore Orioles early bird show. Those guys knocked it out of the park as well. So needless to say, it was a very successful week off. Even though we weren't here with you last week on YouTube, we were very much out in the scene doing what we love to do. So thank you guys for your patience, for hanging out and giving us the week off and letting us go make a few dollars to keep doing what it is that we do. So this week I kind of wanted to dig into a topic of gain structure. I know I've talked about this before in the past, but I've had a bunch of people. It really seems that, excuse me, the educational stuff that we are doing here on YouTube has been a huge hit. Outside of the satire stuff that I've done with you guys, where I'm just kind of acting like an idiot and, really poking fun at a lot of the things that drive us crazy in the music business. The other big thing that is a huge hit here on the channel is the educational stuff. The fact that I take time to talk to the middle market. There's plenty of channels out there that are talking to, pro touring guys and middle market guys who aspire to be pro touring guys. I've worked on that level. It's not someplace I want to be at this point in my life. That's kind of a young man's game. And if I was 31 instead of 51, it might be a completely different conversation, and I would probably still be chasing that rabbit down the rabbit hole. But because that's not where I am now at this place in my life, I'm really super stoked and super happy with, working the middle market. That's nightclubs to county fairs, community concert series stuff, a lot of day festivals this coming week. We have a benefit day festival in Pasadena, Maryland that we'll be doing stage and sound, our audio, with. We're looking forward to that. We're actually prepping for that now. We got a bunch of gear sitting here right next to me that's going out for that show. And we're gonna have a good time, so that's kind of our market, our thing in Fells Point this past week is probably the ceiling as to where we want to be as a company. For a variety of reasons, First of all, it's a huge market. It's gigantic. The middle market represents probably 80 to 85% of all pro audio stuff that is going on, in the world. So there's a lot of money to be made there. It's also very competitive, so it kind of keeps rates where they are. Sometimes that's a pain in the rear end, and I really wish we were making more money. I always wish we were making more money, especially for guys like me who have such huge amounts of money invested in inventory and things like that. But, we're all just kind of out here, a squirrel trying to find a nut and make a living and that sort of thing. We're not the kind of company that chases our competitors' clients or anything like that. We don't do dirty business that way. We're a Christian-owned company, and we really just bid whatever comes to us. When we bump into our competition, we try to be professionals about it. We do our due diligence, but if it's an event we know that another guy has been doing for years and the client's not telling me that, they're leaving that company regardless, if it's us or anyone else, they're bringing a different company in, they're ready for a change. That's one thing. But if they're just looking to try and cut their budget and that sort of thing, I really don't like to be part of those conversations. So I guess even though we're going to talk about gain structure today, I guess we can also say that, we can have a little bit of a lesson here on just business ethics, inside the business. I don't cut throats. I just kind of bid jobs as to what I think is fair for what the services we offer and let the chips fall where they may. I do know that we are competitive and we are just about in the same ballpark as all the other guys that are on our level, So if a client comes to me, and wants to get rid of their regular guy, for whatever reason and go with someone else, that's one thing. If they're looking to just try and pinch a penny and save $1,000 with me over the guy down the street, I usually just avoid those situations. I really don't want to be part of that conversation. I think it's tacky. I mean, in my mind, I don't think it's cool. I don't think it's respectful to the guy down the street, because if the table's returned, I would hope that he would do the same with me. Even if he doesn't, it's between me and God at that point, and I want to be able to sleep well at night and have a clear conscience as to how we do business. Because it's so hard trying to be a man of integrity in this business, because there's plenty of opportunity to be that kind of used car salesman, greaseball worm kind of guy who is just trying to screw the guy down the street. I'm the guy that is crazy enough to believe there's enough work for all of us, and I want everyone to win. I'm not just here trying to take over the world, because that's not my desire. I'm really happy with where we are, and there's always room for improvement. There's always room for more inventory, and things like that. But I have no desire to be a pro touring company. I have no desire to be anything other than who we are, a middle market, production house, that it specializes in church production, specializes in day festivals, and things like that. We do some install as well, so that's all part of the business, framework here. But we also do an enormous amount of consulting, system design, training, troubleshooting, a lot of training, as you guys have learned here on the YouTube channel. So with all that being said, let's get to the topic at hand, because I'm just like all over the place. It's like ADD, week here. If you had any idea the amount of stress that I've been under in the last, 6 or 7 days, then you'd understand why my brain is kind of coleslaw right now. But nevertheless, so gain structure. So one of my guys and I were having a conversation over the weekend about gain structure and different theories on gain structure and that sort of thing. And I guess I'll preface this with, I came from the analog world. I'm 51. I've been doing this since I can remember setting up little sound systems and stuff like that when I was 16, 17 years old. By the time I was 19, I was full-time on the road, mainly pushing cases and pulling cables and all the things that you do to work your way into the business. Was a stage manager for a while. Started out as a drum tech, actually, and then realized, and I was playing in a band that was on the road, and realized that the production people made a lot more money than I made. So I wanted a full-time career in music. So I started leaning into the production side of things instead of being a post-show party animal. I kind of hung out with the crew, and I started paying attention to what they were doing. And that was my start in the business. So I've got a solid 35 years under my belt, most of that in analog, because that's what was going on during that time of the history of pro audio, and again, a whole lot of middle market stuff, a lot of middle market analog consoles back in the day, a lot of middle market, outboard compressors and EQs and gates and all that kind of stuff that we used to make things happen. And I guess a full time, which meant that I walked away from all my analog stuff and went completely digital. I don't know, 15 or 17 years ago, something like that. It's 2024 now. So yeah, I might be pushing 20 years or something or whatever at that point. I don't know, maybe at least like 12, 15 years, something like that. Since I've been exclusively analog, X32 come out, and I had worked at Washington Music Center and seen a lot of Behringer equipment come back in the door as quick as it went out. So I was not a fan of the X32 just because of reliability concerns. And that first generation of X32 definitely had some reliability issues. Not as bad as a lot of the gear before that, but I read an interview with Uni Behringer, who said that he had to learn the hard way that he couldn't run his company over a fax machine, manufacturing stuff in China, which, you hear me on this channel talk a lot from a negative point of view toward Chinese manufacturing, but really that's aimed toward the guys that are just looking to make a quick buck in China. There are good people in China who are making good quality equipment, and every major manufacturer is making equipment in China. I mean, that's the bottom line. The difference between the good guys and the bad guys is the good guys have quality control people from their mother company on site, making sure that quality is where it needs to be and nothing is compromised in the manufacturing process. Uni Behringer was not doing that originally, but that guy is not a stupid businessman. So realizing that he'd kind of dropped the ball on all that stuff and, really needed to somehow validate himself as a legit company, he bought out Midas and Clark Techniques and a whole bunch of really reputable, now he owns Lab Groupon, stuff like that. These are huge, reputable names in the industry. And he put their engineers to work and put together a budget-friendly X32. And I say this, I give this analogy all the time. I don't think I've ever given this analogy on the YouTube channel, so this would be something new. And again, I know I'm kind of just jumping all over the place here this week, but bear with me because I think you'll enjoy this content. Uni Behringer was a genius for this reason. First of all, by buying all those companies, it made everybody scratch their head, guys like me who are well acquainted with these companies that he bought. And was like, okay, well, if you got Midas on your team, okay, maybe you got my attention now. You got not DBX, that's Harman, but you got Clark Techniques, and things like that. Some of those companies, to your credit, now you have my attention. And then he knew that analog guys were not going to ever cross over to digital when entry-level digital consoles at that time were still pretty expensive. Even the PreSonus, which was really the first console, the Studio Live was the first console to kind of hit the market. I never liked the Studio Live from day one. I didn't think the Fat Channel was super intuitive. It's easy to run, but my ears were not telling me the things that I needed to hear with that. It was making me believe that digital is kind of sterile and lifeless, and that sort of thing. Was never a fan. Plus, they had a whole bunch of problems. There was definitely growing pains in the early days of these middle market digital consoles. They kind of got it all figured out now. I mean, some of the low end stuff can be a little problematic, but anybody who's on like M32 or even the QU Allen and Heath, now the SQ is the most popular brand, I think, with the Allen and Heath stuff, and it's 96K. I'm surprised that Midas hasn't put out something more middle market, price friendly, 96K. Maybe it's coming, I don't know. But, Uni Behringer made the X32 so economically feasible that analog guys started saying, hey, look, and I can remember being one of these guys and being like, if I could take just this digital console out that's lighter than my analog console, and I don't have to have a front of house rack, I don't have to have a processing rack in monitor world because all of the EQs and compression and everything is built into the console, and have enough processing power to handle all that from front of house. Like I literally just need amp farm at the stage now, everything else is in the console. That was a mind-blowing thing for us analog guys and very, very attractive because all of us were getting older. All of us have bad backs and are tired of carrying heavy gear, So that got our attention enough to, get into and step into the X32 world and kind of go through the growing pains of learning how to run digital, And then once he got everybody acclimated to that, then, they basically fixed everything that you didn't like about an X32, which was mainly hardware issues, and came out with the M32, which is all Nutrix connectors and, things like that. I mean, both the consoles pretty much sound the same. I think the noise floor is a little lower, probably due to the better hardware that's in it, in the M32 than the X32, but you can still get into an X32 for, I don't know, $22 or $400 or something. And you can get into the M32 for 36, 38, somewhere in that ballpark. The prices keep changing, so don't quote me on that. So, that brought us analog guys into the digital world, and a lot of us are here because of Uni Behringer. A lot of us are here because you came out with a $2,000 console. I remember when the first X32 came out, it was like $2,000, $2,200, something like that. You might even have gotten it for $1,800 if you knew a buddy that was a dealer or something like that. And then a GL2400 24-channel analog console was $2,400, because I remember it was a running joke when I worked at Chuck Levin's Washington Music that the X32 was $2,200 and then the GL2400 was $2,400. It was funny that the model number was the same as the price. So a guy standing there in pro audio looking at like, okay, well, I can buy this analog console and then have to spend another, $1,000 in outboard gear to get everything that I can get out of the X32 that's $200 cheaper. See where I'm going with that? See the genius of Uni Behringer? And, I was super nervous about that because of the track record that Behringer had and all that kind of stuff. I think my first digital console that I was working on consistently was purchased by a band that I was working with, and it was a Soundcraft SI Expression 3. It was very user-friendly. I still love that console to this day. And it felt sort of analog-ish, but it was fully digital. Fader glow is genius, in my opinion. Every console on earth should have fader glow so that, when you're in a dark room, whatever color is lit up on your faders tells you what layer you're on. That's really, really helpful at nighttime and in these nightclubs where it's dark and lighting is horrible anyways. So yeah. So that was the evolution of all that, and how I got into that. And it wasn't long. I went to work for a venue that had an X32. I probably did, I don't know, 1,200-1,500 shows on an X32, and the hardware on that console was starting to get questionable. So I had talked the venue owner into buying an M32, and we went in that direction. And I absolutely fell in love with the M32. It had the robustness and the quality that I needed as a middle market console. Is it the greatest console out there? Not by a long shot, not by a long shot. But there's a reason that I own 4 of them, at this stage of the game. There's a reason why it's rider friendly. There's a reason why, every traveling band that's coming into town is going to have a show file for an M32. That's why I have 4 of them. Personally, I think the SQ Allen & Heath is a much better console, far superior in many ways than the M32. But the M32 is still, I think, in my personal opinion, an industry standard in the middle market. I see tons and tons of nationals, whether they're B nationals or they're up and coming nationals, or they're just full-time professional touring corporate acts, that do high-end corporate stuff, up over the 15K, pay scale, legit touring corporate guys that tour all of North America and sometimes out of the country. All those guys, I still see M32s with all those cats. No one's really made a huge mass exodus to the SQ line. I'm surprised. I really thought that was probably going to happen. When they came out with the SQ, and I'm like, okay, now you can get into a 96K for blah, blah, blah. And but it's more money. It's a couple $1,000s more, to get a 32, channel, framework that's comparable to an M32. And I think guys like me are looking at the 2 consoles and like, you know what? I would really like to have the SQ. I would love to migrate over to that ecosystem, but I haven't run into anything that my M32 can't do. So why spend the money? You know what I'm saying? Well, why spend the extra $2,000 to get the SQ? None of my audience is coming to me in mid-show and being like, you know, dude, this show would sound so much better if it was 96K. You know? Nobody knows the difference, man. You know, it's like me, you, and two other guys within a 50-mile radius even are going to hear the difference between an M32 and an SQ, you know. And I'm not taking anything away from the SQ, and it's worth every penny that they're asking for it. I'm not saying any of that, so don't hate on me, okay? But the reality of it is the M is still an economical choice for guys like me that are in this middle market, fighting tight budgets and trying to make the best, you know, of our ROI, our return on investment. And the M32 just continues to pay for itself over and over and over and over again. The M32C DL32 setup I have in my A-Rig has probably got, I don't know, 700-800 shows on 1,000 shows or something on it, and it's going strong and has not given me one problem. I just updated all 4 of my mixers to the latest firmware that they released in March. That went smooth, you know, haven't had any issues out of any of that stuff. So why spend the extra money? So in terms of our conversation about gain structure and the conversation I was having with one of my crew members this weekend, it was, you know, how gain structure looks different now with analog or with digital than what it did with analog. And I told you all that history because when I first started mixing digital, I made this mistake myself. You know, I made the mistake of pushing the channels too hard because I was so used to, you know, going for that preamp saturation that you get in analog world. And with digital, you should never see any red lights. You know, I mean, you might see one blink every now and then, but as long as there's not an audible distortion there or whatever, you're fine. I usually peak most of my channels in the first or second yellow light because I run my left-right out an aux sub at Unity, you know, which means I don't have to run my channels super hot. I typically, you know, dial in most of my channels around -10 dBu during sound check, and then that gives me, especially with vocals, it gives me a lot of headroom that once the band gets all cranked up, I typically end up with the vocals at the most about -5 dBu or even at Unity. So it gives me a lot of headroom there. Plus with left-right being, you know, at Unity at 0, it gives me tons more sensitivity in the EQ, compression, and specifically the effects. You know, I used to be a guy that set all my channel faders at 0, dialed in my gain to get my meters where I want them so they're peaking at the first or second yellow light in digital world, and then just let left, right, aux sub be wherever it needs to be as far as the volume. And I mixed that way for a very, very long time. And then I had a pro touring guy pop into my venue, and we had a conversation about gain structure and that sort of thing. And he was like, man, just try it. You know, we actually really didn't say a whole lot about it. I really was just watching how he was mixing and was, you know, I'm always trying to be teachable, man. You know what I'm saying? I don't know everything. I do not know everything. You know, so I'm just trying to be teachable and trying to pay attention to what he was doing. And the first thing he did was set left, right at Unity at 0 dBu. And so I just did that one day and just kind of let my channels faders fall where they may. My whole idea behind having a lower left, right out was because I wanted a hotter channel gain so that I had more gain at the monitors, because 99.9% of the time I'm mixing monitors from front of house. So, you know, obviously I want as much channel gain as I can get away with. So I got as much gain, you know, hitting the sub outs, the bus outs is what they call them on the M32. In analog days, those would have just been aux outs. But you know, that input gain affects the aux sends or the bus sends as much as it does your fader at the bottom of the channel. So that's really why I was kind of doing things that way, you know. But what I found was I could still get the input gain, you know, where I wanted it for monitors. I was just really running my output faders at the bottom of each channel at about half of what I had been running them before. But then what I noticed immediately was the EQs were a lot more sensitive. The compressors were working a lot better, more efficiently. And the effects were just spot on. I mean, literally spot on, much more sensitive. And I'm like, wow, imagine that. And if you're someone who already knows this, don't call me a dummy. You know, I'm just being honest with you guys and saying this is the process that I went through from being an analog, you know, sound engineer to being a digital guy. It was something that I had to, you know, I had to adjust. And there was a learning curve there. My mix as a whole front of house didn't drastically change. I mean, my ear for frequency was still always in place. I was always been very good with that and with compression and those sort of things. It just made what I was already doing better. You know, and then my crew member and I were having this conversation, and he was talking about, he freelances a lot, and he's talking about how he looks over the shoulder of different guys and how they mix. And there's a couple guys that he mixes for that runs their, you know, their channels clear up into, you know, borderline clip mode, and, you know, they're left, right, out, lower, and that's just kind of their viewpoint to that. And I wasn't even saying that was wrong. I was just saying, yeah, I remember when I was that guy. You know, I remember when I was the guy that was, you know, kind of doing that and was satisfied with what I was getting. But, you know, we can never be people who aren't afraid, or we can never be people who are afraid of trying something different. You know, look, I'll be the first one to sit here and tell you that there's more than one way to skin a goose when it comes to putting together a nice front of house mix or a monitor mix or something like that. Everybody has their own techniques of doing it. As long as the end result is similar, 99.73% of people are going to be super happy and think you're the greatest guy in the world. I will happily hire a guy who has a different mix philosophy, but has a really good ear for EQing, frequency, and compression, over a guy who has the exact same mix philosophy as me, but doesn't have a good ear for frequency, EQing, and compression. I think the guy who can hear frequency really well and knows how to bring the best out of each instrument, knows how to place each instrument within the frequency bandwidth correctly so that there's room for everything to breathe, that guy, regardless of his mix philosophy, is always going to do better than the guy who's got proper gain structure but just doesn't have an ear for frequency. Because we mix in so many different environments that it's very, very important that you have that ear for frequency and compression, because it's going to change from gig to gig, even outside. Like when I take my big outdoor rig, you know, out with the stage and all that kind of stuff and everything, like I'll give you a great example. These 2 weekends are a good example. Where I was at in Fells Point was in a courtyard. They called it Broadway Square. It was in a courtyard that was probably about 30% or 40% bigger than an NBA basketball court. It wasn't super huge. We had to shoehorn the stage into the place. Trust me, it was, you know, a lot. So my mix position was about, I don't know, 40 or 50 feet from the stage. That's pretty close. And, you know, we were just mixing for that courtyard, you know, and I had the system in cruise control, no problems whatsoever. The amps are happy. We had a good generator. Everything was cool. But then this coming weekend, we're in a big open parking lot where there's not going to be trees and buildings, you know, 30 feet away and all this kind of stuff. It's going to be a big open space. The system's going to respond differently there. You know, so I have to make those adjustments with my ear. I have to make those adjustments for those things, frequency wise. Gain structure obviously is important in that scenario, but being able to hear how the system responds when you really start throwing the onions to it is a big deal, because you have the whole Fletcher Munson, philosophy that, when you start pushing it up, the low end gets bigger, the high end gets a little more sensitive, and the mid range starts doing some weird stuff. So, we got bugs flying around the shop here. It's nighttime because it's like 1,000 degrees during the day. So I didn't want to sweat my rear end off doing the video this week. So I came up here at about midnight, but it was nice and cool. So your system is going to sound differently, when you're really giving it the juice than what it is when you just barely have it on and it's in cruise control. So, you have to be able to adjust the EQ, your house EQ accordingly, because that's really what your house EQ is for, is to adjust for that environment that you're in. Because when I take a scaled down version of that same system into even a large nightclub, it's radically different, it just really is, and then aux feeding sub means that you're dealing with the sub separately than left, right. So you got to be able to hear that and, understand crossover frequency and what is most efficient for your subs, and, the amps that you have running your stuff, and what's going to give you the maximum amount of return for minimum amount of electrical consumption and heat generation, thermal, stuff. Now, all that plays a role in every bit of this, So that was just kind of sort of our conversation, basically everything that I mentioned here, even though we kind of went off into the history of analog to digital, in my life, I had that exact same conversation with my crew member this weekend when we were talking about this. And he was commenting, just his own personal opinion was, he felt like my approach to, this is really what brought up the conversation, my approach to gain structure felt better, was warmer and more responsive than some of the other philosophies that he's bumped into out on the road. And I was very flattered by that, because I really respect this guy, and I respect, his skill set and what he's bringing to the table. So when any of those guys come to me and give me a compliment, it really, really, it makes me feel warm and fuzzy, because, there's a big difference between someone you love and respect telling you you're doing a good job, and, somebody who's just wants to hear wagon wheel telling you how great you are, A lot of times they think you're great just because they see the stage and all the big equipment and all that stuff, and that has them more impressed than the actual mix itself. But when you're standing next to somebody who isn't wowed by all the equipment and really genuinely knows what the mix is like, and how it should be, those are the people that I really respect, and their opinions mean something to me. And this guy's one of those guys. It means something to me that he had that to say about how I mix. And we had some military sound guys in this past weekend too. We were celebrating, our festival was part of Fleet Week, so that's a big military recruitment kind of thing. So we had military bands every day in the schedule. And the last day, the sound engineer came in with that band. I think it was the U.S. Navy band Cruisers. That guy was really on his stuff, man. He really knew what he was doing. The other guys were too, but this guy was a little older, and you could just tell by his mix that he had a much more mature sounding mix. It was warmer. It was much more disciplined in gain structure and EQing and compression, and it just. He mixed like somebody like me, like someone who's been doing this for three decades or more. So we had a bunch of really cool and positive conversation. He was very complimentary of the system. He was very complimentary of, he started out with my scene, and said he really didn't have to do a whole bunch with it, that the system was pretty much already dialed in. Again, that means a lot to me, when guys say those kind of things to me. I never let it go to my head, because listen, man, there's always somebody better. At the same time as I'm getting showered with all these compliments, I've also had other people, you know, tell me that they are, they think that they are on the same level that I'm on. And I think anybody who's worked with us knows that they're not, or worked with them. But you know what? I don't get into those cat fights with guys. You know, you believe whatever you want to believe. You know, listen, I have no ego about any of this. I regularly brush shoulders with guys that are equal, in most cases, better than I am at doing this. And I love and respect those guys. I'm always looking over their shoulder, always trying to learn something new, you know, and I got just mad respect for those guys. This guy that's making these claims is not one of those people, you know, but hey, man, you know, you roll with the punches. It is what it is. I'm genuinely just trying to make a living and trying to make the client happy. We succeeded in doing that this past week, and we will succeed in doing that moving forward and making sure that we are exceeding the expectations of our clients and that those guys are getting the most bang for their buck. So I hope some of this ADD mess made sense to you, and I hope you got, you know, some useful information out of this. If anything, just kind of a perspective as to how an analog guy made the transition to digital, the lessons he learned inside of digital, and basically how he's doing business nowadays. And you know what? That's just what works for me. You know, you do you, boo. Like I always say, you know, I don't get mad at people because they have a different mixed philosophy, or they want to do things different, or they want to, you know, carry a $5,000 Waves rack around with them, you know, on a Mackie console or some kind of crazy nonsense like that. I see that kind of stuff all the time, and it just, I don't know. I mean, you know, some of the guys, some of my competitors have really good paying day jobs. So, you know, what they're doing on the weekends with pro audio is more of a hobby, you know, for them. They have expendable income that comes from their day job that they can just, you know, buy ridiculous, you know, equipment to use for their clients. I mean, there's not a lot of those guys, but some of those guys, that's just kind of how they roll. They're not really worried about ROI, return on investment. They're worried about having a good time when they go out. They want to be part of the party. You know, some of them guys feel like they're better than the guy down the street if they have better gear. And, you know, I always respond to that statement with, it's always the Indian, not the arrow. I know a whole bunch of guys that's got a whole bunch of really cool equipment that isn't necessarily super gifted when it comes to mixing and stuff like that. I know guys that are genius system techs. I mean, geeks to the 10th degree, and could quote you specs on gear that hasn't been made for 30 years. They're just that deep in the rabbit hole of the technical side of this and can't mix their way out of a wet paper bag. You know, and at the end of the day, that's really what it comes down to. No one is going to walk away from a band show talking about how the sound guy, you know, was super intelligent, you know, with his technical knowledge of the system. They're going to walk away talking about either how good it sounded or how bad it sounded. You know, and in my world, my ear has always been my saving grace, whether it's been drumming or it's been running sound. You know, I have a God-given gift, and I have a really good ear, and I'm really good at making the most out of whatever gear you put in front of me. I'm going tomorrow, the next 2 nights, I'm going to be on a little X-Air 18 that belongs to one of my clients. You know, and I don't mix on those little mixers very often, but they're up and coming Nashville people. I really believe that you know, she's going somewhere, and I'm trying to help them. They're close to home here, so I don't have to travel very far to work with them. And whenever my schedule allows it, you know, I try to help those guys out. And she's trying to learn how to run sound on her own and that kind of stuff. So I'm trying to set up start scenes and save them in the console and, you know, that sort of thing, so that she has a good starting place when she goes out, whether she's full band or she's just a duo or trio or whatever. So, you know, I'm not so far up the pro audio ego ladder that I'm below, or I'm above, you know, working on that level. Yeah, I do what pays the bills, man. You know, I had a little bit of time this week. This stuff all came about yesterday, and I had a little bit of time in the middle of the week here where I was really just going to try to rest and catch my breath. But, we're in peak season now, and we got to make money, while the sun is shining, make hay while the sun shines. Excuse me. So that's just sort of where we are. We do it all. We don't sit on a high horse looking down on everybody. I know, ego. I did a short, I don't even know, about 2 weeks ago about ego inside the pro audio business. And dear God, man, that blew up like a tick. I have had dozens of people either come to me in person or, send me private messages through social media talking about either telling horror stories of the stuff that they have been through with sound guys that had big crazy egos and that sort of thing. And look, man, everybody working in the music business has an ego to some degree. Some of us manage it better than others. Some of us do really well with that. Some of us don't. When I was younger, I definitely did not do well with that. I definitely had an ego. I knew that I was gifted and talented, and it probably robbed me of some learning opportunities. And it wasn't until I got over 40 that I was able to really let a lot of that go and start to, get in a humble place of just always being open to being teachable and that kind of stuff. And I'm 51 now, so that goes back over 10 years ago. I was just really trying to get in a place where I want to continue to grow as a sound engineer. When I get around my pro touring buddies, I pay attention, man. I pay attention to what them guys are saying. I pay attention to what they're doing. If I am lucky enough to be invited into the tech booth at one of their shows or something, I shut up and listen. I'm not sitting there trying to validate and tell them all the great and mighty things that I've done. No, I'm trying to be a student and a sponge and learn, and ask myself what they're doing and how it can apply to the middle market without overcomplicating things, That's the other thing that goes back to some of these weekend warriors that got more money than they do brains is, they crazily overcomplicate things. They make their mix way, way more. I know a guy that was carrying a waves rack around, and man, it was probably 6 months with this band that he was working with before he ever really got a handle on it, before it really started, his front of house mix started coming together, had all kinds of implementing problems with it, and it was just a mess for a while. And I was just kind of like, man, you're using a good, middle market mixer that already has all the tools you need to do what you need to do. It doesn't need to be this complicated, but for some guys, that's kind of how they get their rocks off. They get their jollies, being the guy who has the most complicated setup and, makes it sound good. I take a lot of pride in taking the least amount of gear to a gig and producing the same result or better. And in most cases, better. And I'm not just saying that because I'm bragging. I'm saying that because you can ask any of my clients and they'll tell you that. There's a reason why they call me first or second on their list of people, before they call all the other people. We're extremely consistent. We put a lot of work into maintaining gear, a lot of work into continued education and growing and, trying to be the best that we can be at what we do. Instead of trying to do 800 things, we try to do 4 or 5 things and do them really, really well. And that is our business model and how we have framed COP Audio and Staging. And it's just kind of how we're doing business, man, and it's working for us. And I'm not hating on the weekend warrior that's got more money than he does brains. I mean, you do you, boo. Go out there. If you want to take an SD9, Digico console and a freaking D&B line array to your local Moose Lodge to do a B band, man, rock it out. It's all good. I'm not mad at you. I hope to get a night off where I can come out and kind of look around at your toys and, maybe learn something. Because I don't work on stuff on that level regularly. And I'm as curious about it as anybody else, but I'm not so curious about it that I'm willing to make unwise business decisions and trying to spin myself into a hole I'll never get out of. And let me tell you, that is real easy to do in pro audio. It's real easy to dig yourself into a financial hole just trying to keep up and trying to stay relevant. I had that conversation with a buddy of mine in Chicago the other day, in private message on Facebook. It's like, it's so hard to make enough money to make a living and, be able to pay your bills and, all that, gear payments and truck payments and insurance. And, I got like $1,500 worth of liability insurance I got to pay at the end of the month, and that sort of thing. And then stay relevant. Then continually investing in your inventory to stay relevant, and that sort of thing. It's tough, man. It's a hard road to hoe. This is not for sissies, All the young guys that come through my company, I always tell them the same thing. Whatever you do, don't start a production company. Because unless you got deep pockets, it's really hard to make it. You'll do much better having a small little, powered corporate rig, and a decent mixer, and then freelancing for other people, working for guys like me, working for venues or looking for house guys, that sort of thing. You'll have way less stress and probably make about the same amount of money as if you started buying gear. I do pretty well for myself, but man, we work hard, man. We work really hard to get where we are, to maintain our clients, and to not let the stress of the business get the best of us, because that's a whole nother video we could do on that. So 45 minutes, 46 minutes into this, I don't even know what it is now. I hope you enjoyed this. Please like and subscribe. If you made it this far, you need to subscribe. I mean, come on. You're officially part of the family. If you made it 47 minutes, 48 minutes into this, you are part of the family. Hit the subscription button, hit the notification bell. We post these every Wednesday when I'm not, losing my mind doing festivals in the summer. We miss a week here and there because of, work schedule. But other than that, we are here for you, and we're trying to offer a free resource to you so that you can do what you do better. Hopefully this information, helps you. So I love you guys. I'll see you next week.